And now an author panel on religion and culture from the 2007 Los Angeles Times Festival of Books, filmed live earlier today. At this event, you'll hear from Jonathan Kirsch, author of A History of the End of the World, and Zachary Karabell, who wrote Peace Be Upon You. Also, God is Not Great author Christopher Hitchens. This is about an hour.
Of course, there's a book signing that's following this. Isn't that why we're here? So let me begin by introducing people who you probably already know. We have with us today Christopher Hitchens, all the way at the far left, who is...
Thank you.
Terrific writer and a decent human being who's here to promote a book that is already number 12 on the Amazon list, and
10.
It's not even out yet. 10. It's not even out yet. That's unbelievable to me.
Yeah.
Mine are all out. It's nowhere on Amazon. The title of the book is God is Not Great, How Religion Poisons Everything, which is a book about, I think you know. It's fairly self-explanatory. He's here in some ways to provide his own book of Revelation. Speaking of Revelation, my good friend Jonathan Kirsch is here, who reviewed my last book so favorably in the Washington Post. I'm here to be his body man.
That's how to make friends in the book business.
He is here to discuss his book, A History of the End of the World, How the Most Controversial Book in the Bible Changed the Course of Western Civilization, which is essentially a book discussing the book of Revelation and the way it's been used and abused in the name of apocalyptic fanaticism. And then, of course, last but not least, the dapper and always handsome Zachary Karabell, who is here to discuss Peace Be Upon You, the story of Muslim, Christian, and Jewish coexistence. And this book, we'll get Zachary to talk about it, is really discussing what many people don't realize, that over the last 1,400 years there have been periods of time in which Jews, Muslims, and Christians got along fabulously. So let us begin. We all know by now the term of art, the clash of civilizations. And we also know that we live in an era of religious extremism and fanaticism, and there are some people who believe that religion and faith are responsible for these clashing conflicts between civilizations. So our panel here is here to discuss whether religion and culture can mix in any meaningful way. Now, Christopher, we'll begin with you. Your title is very revealing on its face, and one wonders whether, given the title of your book, whether you have any particular religious philosophy that you wish to denounce, or should we just say that you are an equal opportunity infidel?
Does this mean I don't have to take a shot at the actual panel question? I'm willing to try it if you like. I came open-minded and prepared. Well, to answer your question at least, I'm with Bertrand Russell on this point. I mean, there is in theory nothing to choose between any kind of religion or any version of it. My way of phrasing it is that they're all, in their separate and wonderful ways, equal glimpses of the same untruth. And therefore it needn't particularly matter whether you're a Quaker or, say, a Mormon or a Shia Muslim or a worshipper of the Emperor of Japan, because the illusion is the same in each case, and the demand that you surrender what is, in my view, your most precious faculty, that's your ability to reason, and your ability to practice self-doubt and self-criticism and skepticism. In other words, that you will take something on faith and expect to be praised and respected for doing so. We do it all the time ourselves. You hear it all the time on television and in American politics. People are praised for having faith, just for having it. Doesn't matter what it is. In fact, President Eisenhower said, it's really important to have a religious belief, and I don't mind what it is either. Because just the ability to surrender your mind is enough. Well, I know that I'm going to have to put up with a lot of this, and I know that it is innate in us. That's true. It's not something that can be extirpated or that should be extirpated, as long as our prefrontal lobes are too small and our adrenaline glands are slightly too big. And we show all the other signs of what Darwin calls the lowly stamp of our origin. We are half a chromosome away from chimpanzees, and our religious beliefs show that. Religion is what you would expect if it had been made up by such a tribe. For all that, I know one can't ever get out of this argument. Indeed, all I can hope to do is keep the argument going and see if I can inject any stuff into it. But what I do think we can contest, and must contest, is the idea that this irrationality needs to be respected or revered. That's asking too bloody much, if you ask me.
Jonathan, I thought that the New Testament was all about love, meaning love, mercy, and forgiveness. And it was about loving thy neighbor, not seeking vengeance against thy neighbor. So what is essentially irreconcilable about Christianity and culture in this way? If the religion is really about love and kindness, what's so irreconcilable about them?
Well, every word I've written about the scriptures of Judaism or Christianity is based on the idea that we read these texts too selectively and not critically enough and not discerningly enough. And that's the reason why we often think things are in the Bible that are not and are surprised when we find them. Revelation, which is the favorite text of a great many believing Christians today, is an outlier in Christian scripture and is plainly contradictory to the message that Jesus teaches in the Gospels. All of my books, including my current book, are meant as a corrective to these, what I would argue, are misreadings, misunderstandings. To get into it a little bit with Christopher, I think I have to say that these texts are capable of inspiring elevated moral aspirations and conduct in human beings, demonstrably so, and to throw out religion altogether or to hold it in contempt and not in respect is to throw out the baby with the bathwater. Having said that, there's just no question that the book of Revelation is the favorite text of religious violence, at least in the Christian context, and has moved men and women to do some terrible things, David Koresh being an ardent reader of Revelation, but only the most recent example of that phenomenon. The bottom line is that these are potentially inspiring texts and also potentially dangerous texts, and we have to be able to discern between those two uses of the same text.
So Zachary, what's gone wrong? 1400 years, we've had periods of time that we learn in your book where the three religions tolerated one another and coexisted, and yet we have a panel here that's here to discuss the way in which these three religions are inimical to culture.
You know, first of all, it's kind of interesting that we're organized in the light and dark fashion here. I feel like we should be in the forces of light and forces of darkness, but the panel's not lining up that way. Although Christopher is clearly torn.
It's not. Cool.
I think that, if we'd been here 100 years ago, we wouldn't have been having this debate, because the cultural assumption 100 years ago was that religion was going to quickly become a quaint, rather backward, private, silly but tolerable force in the affairs of public life and human existence. And I think that bears remembering only because now we seem to be in a cultural moment where religion has become the convenient bogeyman of the day to explain and to some degree excuse all sorts of human irrationality, violence, and ugliness. And I realize in retrospect, with my book hovering very near where Christopher's is with 3 zeros affixed to the end, that had I been a little savvier about the culture du jour, I should have called the book something like "Religion Doesn't Matter," because the point, I think, is that the notion that one can either respect or disrespect or believe or disbelieve in religion, and religion I'm talking about not as a set of beliefs, simply religion as an observable, unequivocally present force in human history, is a little like arguing for or against race or ethnicity or the dawn, in that it simply is. And like anything that has survived the test of time as a category that helps human beings organize themselves and may or may not be true in any of its particulars, it allows for a wide variety of human behavior, from the most sublime to the most mundane, from the most transporting to the most depressing. And I think in that sense, we are at a cultural juncture where religion in the hands of a few is exhibiting and allowing for the ugliness more observably, but I wouldn't argue actually that in fact amongst people who call themselves believers worldwide that they are more likely to do violence than people who are not considered to be observers. It's simply that those are the squeaky wheels du jour and get the most amount of attention. So while I respect the nature of the debate, and it's been one that human beings have been having for quite some time, I think to some degree it becomes a convenient excuse or a convenient target or a convenient reason, but one that can prevent us from looking a little more deeply at the fact that human beings do have a tendency to behave in all sorts of ways, violence and intolerance being one, and that if they have religion as a ready-made reason for it, they will use it. And if they don't have religion as a ready-made reason for it, they will use something else.
Christopher, we want to respond to that. I have another question for you, but go ahead.
Well, there were two implied challenges I thought to your humble servant, and I wouldn't want it said that I let them go. I simply have never understood why it is that people think that while the Old Testament is admittedly a bit rugged, the New Testament is gentle Jesus, meek and mild. The Old Testament is full of absolutely horrific injunctions, of course, to genocide and to slavery and to genital mutilation and all of these other highly recommended Sinai-based programs. But there is no mention in the Old Testament of the torture and punishment of the already dead. You have to get to gentle Jesus, meek and mild before you're introduced to hell. That's when hell comes in the New Testament. The single most evil teaching of the religious, and the one that's done the most psychological damage to children, religion being, in my opinion, more or less now coterminous with child abuse, in that not just in the practices of the clergy, I mean, but in the installation, which if rendered in Latin incidentally would read like this: no child's behind left. I don't just mean the practices of the clergy, I mean the practice of instilling terror into children and fear, the evil practice of doing that. That's a strictly New Testament scheme. Who said the following? The worst that a nuclear war could do would be to bring millions of people into paradise rather earlier than they would otherwise get there. Who said that? You would think if I asked you that as a blank text without an author, you would say, well, perhaps Mr. Rafsanjani in Iran, or some nutcase settler in Gaza, or some such, or ranter in Georgia, or hedge priest in Alabama. It was the Archbishop of Canterbury, the head of the sweet and mediocre Church of England, the Episcopalian movement, who said that, Geoffrey Fisher, as late as 1964. Because, of course, religion has to be eschatological. It has to hope that this veil of tears will shortly pass away. It has to view our life and our culture as transient and with contempt. If it didn't do that, it would not be religion. It wouldn't deserve the name. And you can't just blame this on the book of Revelation. Even C.S. Lewis admits that everything that Jesus said is complete nonsense if it isn't uttered by somebody who believes the world is about to come to an end. Only in that sense does it make sense to say, take no thought for the morrow. Don't care about possessions. Don't care about progress or literacy or improvement or thrift or any of the things that make culture possible. There's no point. It'll all be over real soon. Well, this is why culture and religion are eventually incompatible. And so those of us who want transcendence of the kind Zachary mentions, or something awe-inspiring beyond ourselves, should look through the Hubble telescope and see how wonderful that is. Or read a page of Stephen Hawking and see what awe-inspiring things there are in the cosmos. And then see if you can turn away from that and be impressed by the burning bush.
Christopher, having made a study of Revelation, I feel I have to pick up this gauntlet. A couple of weeks ago, I was invited to speak at a Unitarian church here in Southern California, and on my way over, I passed a business establishment called the Alpha and Omega Car Repair Shop. And I used that in my talk, and I'm going to use it today to make the point that although Revelation certainly paints a horrific view of the urgent and imminent end of the world, what Christianity was forced to come to terms with was the failure of that prophecy. There have been many disordered minds, even unto our own days, who continue to believe that Revelation tells us the things which must soon come to pass. But the great majority of Christians have settled down and tried to do the work of what in Jewish tradition is called tikkun olam, the repair of the earth. And I think to argue that religion in its major effect has just encouraged people to wait for the end ignores the fact that again and again we have examples of how it has moved people to make the world a better place. The example I use in my own book, and I'd like to mention, is that although Revelation is used frequently by evangelicals who predict the imminent end of the world, it is also used by Catholic liberation theologians to recommend the improvement of the world.
The fact that Christian teaching is unbelievable most of the time, even to most Christians, is, I think, not an argument that these books are not claimed by Christians to be the work of God. Now, are these books the word of God or aren't they? It's not an optional thing if you're a Christian. You're not entitled to take that question a la carte. The fact that it is humanly unbelievable is a point surely for me rather than for you.
I'm sitting here not worried with the dog in this fight, but for about 5 years the Hubble telescope was broken. The lenses were distorted. There was solar dust occluding the lenses, and if one had looked through the Hubble telescope to appreciate the wonders of the heaven, the picture you would have gotten would have been wrong. Now, eventually people went up and fixed it, but I think somewhat like religion.
They polished it.
They polished it, they did. And now it's much shinier.
Incredible.
Like a Hubble telescope reformation. So human scientific systems are equally, if not more, flawed, and I say this as a complete non-scientist.
Well, they're chimpanzee-based.
Yeah.
Christopher, everything you write, Christopher, presupposes a certain respect for the life of the mind, an engagement with books, a romance of ideas, the sense that everything, all the fundamental truths can be learned through literature. But here we are in Southern California on a Sunday morning, and many people in this room are here. They could otherwise be in church. They've come here instead to the Church of the Los Angeles Times Book Festival. There are people at home, watching at home from C-SPAN. They too could have been in church, and they've chosen to be here. The fact is, many of the people in church don't draw their comfort from Shakespeare and Dostoevsky. They draw it from Scripture and from their faith. And for those people, they only have one book, the only book that really means anything to them. And books and earthly authors are not enough for most people to draw comfort. And so maybe, can't we just acknowledge the fact that religion plays a profoundly important role in the lives of people?
Oh, I'd have no difficulty in acknowledging that at all. I mean, Martin Luther did say, it was one of his proudest statements, I am a man of one book. Loyola says we sacrifice the intellect to God. Again, why am I supposed to respect these appalling sayings? But, I mean, every year on the Feast of Eid, which is roughly the same, the Muslim version, well, it's exactly the same story, but it's celebrated with even more fanaticism. People kill a sheep in praise of Abraham's willingness to conduct a human sacrifice on his son. They think that's the most wonderful moral story they can think of. Now, here's where I part company. I don't think that someone's willingness to slaughter his son because he's hearing voices in his head is a great example of moral suasion. And maybe there's something I'm missing here. But I have a terrible feeling that those who do think that that surrender, that willingness to commit murder, to commit infanticide under a psychopathic delusion is a sign of virtue. And if that was not the case, I would not have had to write a book showing that religion is a root of evil, which it is, as I've just demonstrated. Thank you.
I don't want to ignore the events of the last 1,000 years of progress towards enlightenment, even within the handling of these texts. People of faith today, in all of the organized religions, are capable of entertaining the idea that these are, of course, books of human authorship. We can quibble about whether they are divinely inspired or not, but they are put into human contexts and put to human uses. And I think it's a specious argument to say that you either have to take it or leave it on the basis of medieval theology. Clearly, these texts can be used and understood in a modern context, and by most readers of these texts, they are understood in precisely that sense. The fundamentalists are a convenient straw man, in a sense, because they are so extreme in their beliefs.
Because they believe it's true, yeah.
Yeah, but they are not the only readers or users of these texts. The reality is there's a whole literature, of which my own book is a very tiny part, which allows us to understand the human face, the human names, the human impulses of the human authors of these texts.
Zachary, a good moment here for you to describe what's different about Dubai and Turkey.
What is different about Dubai? You know, we spend a lot of time focusing on religious conflict, focusing on those areas of the world that bleed. That's not just a media problem, it's a human problem, because human beings like history filled with body counts, just like they like Hollywood blockbusters filled with body counts. The notion of paying a lot of attention to coexistence or to people simply going about their lives and getting along doesn't really have much of a narrative arc. You know, there are no novels about a happy family. I don't think anyone, by the way, ever took solace from Dostoevsky, but that's a separate point. So we pay a lot of attention to Baghdad because it's dramatic and it's a mess. We pay somewhat less attention to Dubai because it's chaotic, but it is not bloody. And it is, for those of you who don't know, a city-state in the Persian Gulf, which briefly filtered into American consciousness about a year ago when a business arm of the Dubai Emir attempted to buy the operations of a number of ports, including the port of Long Beach, which led to an orgy of criticism of the Bush administration, and was promptly scuttled, and everyone, I imagine, somewhat forgot about Dubai. But you know, Dubai is a several $100 billion emirate, well, at least several $100 billion filter through there, of about 1.5 million people. That's kind of the best and worst of Singapore, Miami, and Las Vegas plopped down on the Persian Gulf. And it's a place where people don't care about what you believe, and they don't care to which god you pray. They care simply about how much money you have in your bank account and what your next business deal is going to be. And it's a place where the Emir of Dubai can very happily purchase properties from Mortimer Zuckerman, the head of Boston Properties, which operates, among other things, the W Hotel in Manhattan, as well as other properties. Mortimer Zuckerman, a strong contributor to Israeli causes and an ardent believing Jew. The Emir of Dubai, a strong Arab Muslim ruler. Or who can have a 20% ownership stake in Kerzner International, which operates Atlantis casinos in the Bahamas, and they're building one along with Donald Trump off the coast, gambling and liquor and other sorts of
Well, we're coexisting, but I think one could be a bit more dialectical. I mean, I was just in Tunisia, for example, which is a country of enormous interest, and I agree very much with what Zachary said. Because of its tranquility and civilization, almost uncovered. It doesn't bleed, so it doesn't lead. But it has now 74 years life expectancy, the highest in Africa. 80% home ownership, complete education for all women. The veil is banned, religious parties are not allowed. Islam is taught in the schools and practiced by the state, but in a very mild form. What you can show in this case, as you can in all the others, is the less religion, the more civilization. I mean, implicitly, I think Jonathan was making the same point. He said, well, as we improve, as we progress, we believe less in the absurd Bronze Age myths of the holy books. Well, is this a claim in favor of religion or not? It seems to me that that kind of defense is an undermining of it. It says we're gradually outgrowing and learning to domesticate and civilize this barbaric impulse. Well, good. I'm not against that.
Jonathan, if not for the book of Revelation, would Christianity have more common elements with the broader common culture in which we all live?
Well, I make the argument that Revelation created the culture in which we live. I ought to mention that Revelation is itself a commentary on Daniel, a book of the Hebrew Bible, so this is a portal through which Judaism passes into Christianity. These are common traditions, and they pass from Christianity into Islam. So the idea that one of the gifts of the Jews is the idea that history has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and the end is going to be bad. The argument I make is that we are predisposed to see things that way, and that's not the only way to see them. There are cultures that see history as cyclical, as having a constant renewal. But that's who we are, and we are predetermined predisposed by our culture to see things that way. Now, most of us, perhaps in this room, who come to the Church of Books on Sunday morning, are familiar with these ideas when we see them in Dr. Strangelove or On the Beach or any number of apocalyptic science fiction movies. Revelation was the science fiction of the first century, and it fired the same synapses in its first readers that science fiction fires in the synapses of people who live today. But that's who we are as a civilization. To argue if there had been no book of Revelation, and by the way, that's a plausible argument. Revelation was distrusted by the church fathers. It was excluded from the eastern half of Christian tradition up until the High Middle Ages, and it was dubious whether that apocalyptic view of the world would play the role that it turned out to play, but in fact it did. And that's something that I think that we should all acknowledge, all of us out of intellectual honesty, that it is not a matter of arguing religion versus culture. Religion is our culture. To quote Karen Armstrong, a wonderful writer on this subject, it is perhaps more accurate to refer to our species not as Homo sapiens, rational man, but as Homo religiosus, believing man, and that's who we are. To say, is it a good thing?
That does suggest a contrast between those two concepts, does it not?
Well, we can progress, and we can hope for the ascent of humankind, and I think we all agree on that. But to answer Thane's question, we are who we are because of the way we are wired, and we are the way we are because of the civilization in which we have been reared.
But Jonathan, you point out that in America, Revelation, the book of Revelation is particularly problematic because it's not so much about persecution, but in fact its impact on politics and culture. The moral majority, even in some ways the evangelical support for Israel, the abortion debate, certainly the debate about family values, all of that can be understood in apocalyptic end-of-the-world terms.
And I find myself outflanked on the left, literally, by Christopher. My books are not inspirational books that are meant to send you back to your Bible as a true believer. I, in fact, have a lot of critical things to say about the way Revelation has been read and used. And the principal critique, and it's a crucial point, which I'm glad I have a chance to underscore, is that the most radical reading of the book of Revelation, the most dangerous reading, used to be confined to tent revivals and snake handlers and people we never saw or heard. It passed by the mass media from the tent revival to radio, from radio to television, from television to the internet, and into presidential politics. It was Hal Lindsey in the 70s who wrote a book called The Late Great Planet Earth, a very dangerous and important book that sold 20 million copies before there was an Amazon. It was a phenomenal bestseller. One of its readers was a man named Ronald Reagan. He took these ideas with him into the White House. He invited Hal Lindsey to brief Pentagon war planners. He was famous for saying, "We may be the generation that sees Armageddon," which is a pretty unnerving thing to hear fall from the lips of the man who has the American nuclear arsenal at his command. Those are real problems, and I would argue that in America, and now I'm getting a little more in sync with what the argument Christopher has made, when we live in a culture, in a political culture, where the choice to terminate a pregnancy is taken away from women because of the influence of a political idea that boils up out of this fundamentalist reading of Scripture, we are all endangered by that.
But I mean, isn't this, at least even, certainly Christopher, who I think is chomping at many bits here, I mean, isn't this the fundamental problem of this conversation that we've engaged in, that it's not really religion, it's radical religion that we need to be worried about? Christopher, I'll get you in a second. I know you want back in. I mean, there are many Muslims who read the Quran and practice Islam who are not overwhelmed by jihadist mindsets. There are Christians who are in church today who are not thinking about the Antichrist or apocalypse or Armageddon or the end of the world or any apocalyptic visions. There are Jews who don't spend their days in synagogue romanticizing about Judea and Samaria. Those people, I suspect, are able to reconcile their religious beliefs with their commitment to secular cultural participation. Christopher?
Okay, this will be the first time you've ever heard someone move straight from the life of Brian to Albert Camus. The knight's move goes like this. You remind me of the Sermon on the Mount that Brian gives, where his auditors seem to hear him say, "Blessed are the cheesemakers." And someone in the audience says, no, it's not supposed to be taken literally. It's a reference to really anyone involved in the dairy industry. It's much more general than that. Now, all I know is what these books actually do say. And what they do say is what they actually say, such as the case of Abraham and Isaac. I don't know what other reading you have of that, other than it's considered praiseworthy, if you hear the relevant voice in your head, to be willing to kill your own child to please God. There it is in cold print, and that's what people take from it. What about Camus? Well, in La Peste, which is another book people don't exactly read for consolation, The Plague, there's a wonderful ending where it says that finally Iran is free again and the terror is over and the plague has gone away. But the rats are still down there in the sewers and they're still carrying and incubating those bacilli and they're waiting their chance, and they will, as the book ends by saying, one day those sewers will send their rats up again to die in a free city. Any fundamentalist or fanatic is always able, and you've just demonstrated it with the Lindsay case, at any time to revive the bacilli and say, look, it says here, this is God's word, you haven't been paying attention. Any Muslim who thinks that his duty is to kill or conquer all non-Muslims has absolute Quranic authority to do so, can always find it. Is this book the word of God or not? I think self-evidently not. It's a very inept plagiarism of Judaism and Christianity, as is almost the whole of the Islamic canon. But there is the authority. Does the Al-Azhar Mosque, the spiritual headquarters and intellectual HQ of Sunni Islam in Cairo, has it yet issued a denunciation saying it is not permitted to Muslims, it is haram to blow up the mosques of their co-believers, their Shia in Iraq? No, it has not done so. This is uncondemned. I'll give you countless other examples. And finally, on this point of the most overrated thing of all, I think, ecumenicism. Some of you may remember when my friend Salman Rushdie was issued a death sentence and a life sentence in the same moment by the unelected, theocratic dictator of a foreign state who suborned murder in his own name for money for the crime of writing a novel. Probably remember it. There were those who said the problem was the ability of a foreign theocrat to suborn money for murder in his own name. And there were those who said, no, the problem is Salman Rushdie has written a profane novel. Listed in the second column were His Holiness the Pope, the Cardinal Archbishop of New York City, the Archbishop of Canterbury, the Chief Rabbi of Israel. All said the problem here is blasphemy, not incitement to murder. When the chips are down, I apologize for the vulgarism, when push comes, as it does, to shove, that is the form ecumenicism takes. The same with the attempt to make it a capital crime to draw a cartoon in Denmark. What does the Vatican condemn? After the embassies of a small democracy have been burned, its diplomatic immunity violated, its citizens attacked, a deliberate attempt made to destroy its economy by boycott and sabotage. What does the Vatican condemn? The cartoons. This is the religious mentality, and I'm sorry to have to keep saying it, it needs to be opposed. We need to have inoculation against plague, not the spread of a more gentle version of it. Thank you.
Zachary?
Something to chew on. I think part of the issue is it's very easy to ascribe, the actions of the few to the sentiments of the many. It's very easy to indict religious scripture based on certain things that it says, and it is very easy to assume that because some people totalize religion, make it totalitarian, that therefore religion is in and of itself totalitarian. it strikes me that on Christopher's points, all of which are admittedly true, that one can find as many examples of people animated to do similar things where religion is simply not part of the warp and woof of their experience. I mean, I don't recall many American secularists in the past few years making a lot of effort to condemn the actions of the Colombian government against the FARC guerrillas in the drug war. That this is not something, I don't believe there's a panel on this at the LA Times. I don't believe that what's going on in terms of civil war in the Congo today is really animating a lot of people to stand up and speak. I mean, when was the last time one of you passed a demonstration about what was going on in one province or another of the Congo, where several million people have died in the past few years? So silence is not necessarily indicative of support by any institution or set of individuals. And furthermore, the idea that religion is this one easy pat category is simply not true. I mean, there's religion as a human system of organization. There's religion as a control system imposed from above. And then there's religion as the lived experience of people. And look, if we teach our children to become aware of the fact that the world does not revolve around them, and some of us obviously do a better job imparting that lesson than others. But, if religion as a source of humility, of the sense of we are but small things in the greater scheme, whether it's 6 billion people on the planet and rising, whether it's a vast solar system as perceived through the inaccurate or accurate Hubble telescope, the fact is that we need those lessons of how not to determine the entire shape of our actions by the fact that I want and I need and I desire, but that there are other people around us. And insofar as religion, whether it is Islam or Judaism or Christianity or Buddhism or any of these other things, or contemporary liberal secularism, have been a source of that lesson, that's certainly not something to go out of our way to condemn, because it's clearly a human necessity.
This is fantastic. Religion is the source of the belief that the universe is all about you and is created with you in mind. It preaches solipsism to everybody, in the same way as it preaches them to grovel and consider themselves guilty and wicked and filthy and sinful. It cheers them up by saying, but God has a plan just for you and the universe is designed to prove it. What could be more solipsistic than that? That's an appeal to the grossest kind of selfishness, as well as the grossest kind of stupidity.
I would like to point out that although I think everyone in this room would agree, and certainly all of us agree, that there are dangerous extremists in religion, the idea that
that's
you
not
will
an extreme
address
belief, my dear. You keep saying this. Are you saying religion does not say that God is the author of the universe? That's only what fundamentalists.
Let me finish my thought. If we define a problem to be solved, the last way that will be effectively solved is to take the militant stance that all religion is evil, all religion is valueless, and it must be shunned. No one who presents a problem to us with their religiosity are going to hear those words, much less respond to them. So it is essentially a sterile argument. The argument that must be made has to be made in a language that can be understood. There are scriptures that can be cited to those who are poisoned, for instance, by the book of Revelation, from other passages where Jesus says, love them that hate you, feed the hungry, clothe the naked. There are messages that can be heard. I want to close this remark by pointing out
immoral to love your enemies.
There's a debate in the media today. It's a very, it's funny and quirky about whether it's the right thing or the wrong thing to build a footbath at a community college so that a devout Muslim student can perform the foot washing ritual, which is part of his and her creed. And the argument is, should we be doing this? The argument that I would make is that's precisely where we want fundamentalist Muslims to be. We want them to be in the community colleges, in the majority culture, in and among us, because that has been the success of the American experiment with religion. When we are exposed to each other's beliefs, it is a moderating influence. And if we shun and condemn and demonize people who have beliefs and practices different than those that we're comfortable with, all we're going to do is drive them into isolation where precisely this bacillus can fester.
Christopher? Yeah, just a quick point on that. I suppose I would disagree with that a bit, in that I don't believe that knowledge of someone else actually leads to respect and honoring of someone else. People are fully capable of knowing a whole lot about each other and detesting each other. So I mean, this notion of with knowledge and the banishing of ignorance comes respect, I think is hopeful, but in no way proved. I mean, if anything, a lot of coexistence and tolerance is a very cold coexistence and tolerance. It's, I hate you, but I'm not going to go out of my way to kill you. And, you know, in the world that we're living in, that's an awfully low bar. I mean, it's not the Rodney King school of can't we all just get along. It's can't we just deal with each other, be offended and move on. And, you know, secular society has been decent at encompassing those. But so have a lot of Muslim societies historically been much better at dealing with difference in, yes, somewhat of a disdainful fashion than certainly the contemporary Muslim world. And to some degree, some of the more tolerant secular societies, as we now look at, aren't so tolerant after all.
I suspect that's what the word to tolerate means. It means certainly doesn't to embrace, it means to put up with. Christopher, there are all sorts of people who fast during Ramadan and yet go to movies. People who pray in synagogues and participate in the cultural life of their community. People go to Mass and go to the opera as well. They found a way to reconcile their faith and the religion with their belief in a common culture. And so that for them, religion and culture do mix. Are these people simply delusional? I mean, isn't that what we should be aspiring to find a way to reconcile both so that we can answer this question here today in the affirmative?
No, let's be fair, they're only partly delusional, but then most of us are in one form or another. I mean, these people have the open mind that you wish for. No, they read books. They watch Monty Python and the plays. They have the same irritating habit as the good Dr. Kirsch has evinced today, which is you say, so you tell me you're a Catholic. Believe me, I'm really very interested in this. I've read a lot about it. I've studied it. I think it's very important. I think philosophy begins where religion ends. This argument matters a huge amount to me. So why do you say that you think that it matters that Jesus was born of a virgin? And why would his being born of a virgin reflect credit on any subsequent teachings he might have in mind? Now, I think that's a perfectly fair and civilized question, don't you? Well, obviously not particularly. Well, anyway, I do. I think it's an okay question. If the person then says, well, I don't really believe that Jesus was born of a virgin, I say, well, then in what sense are you really telling me you're a Catholic? Because what else am I to go by? So, well, I'm only a sort of social Catholic. I go to the church, and I'd like to give money to charity. I say, well, that's fine. No further questions. But all you guys keep on saying to me is, look, secularism makes great advances all the time. Good. I'm all in favor of it. I want that advance to continue and deepen and broaden and extend. You're not making a point against me by saying there's a lot of secularism, but by refusing to admit that religion actually does claim to have total knowledge. It says it knows the mind of God and what God wants you to do. Does it not? How can you say you're religious if you don't say that? It says it knows where humanity came from and why. It says it knows the authorship of the cosmos and it understands the design. These are large and fantastic claims, as they would have to be.
But what about
if they're being made by people who claim the right to arbitrate your sex life, your reading, your diet, and other matters?
But there are people who have what we could describe as mid-level belief.
What is that? They sort of, you can't half believe in God, it seems to me.
They derive a comfort.
In the sense that I half understand relativity.
But Christopher, that's precisely the fallacy of your argument. Yours is a binary, open and shut, all or nothing argument, and it ignores the reality.
Do you think religion says that God created the universe and the species?
Well, first of all,
or not?
But people can maintain religious beliefs and practices without going all the way.
First of all, it's a nonsensical question.
Like Jonathan Miller saying, I'm not a Jew, I'm just Jewish.
There is not.
Go the whole hog, you know.
The Bible says many different and inconsistent things, as you very well know, and use to advance your argument, and so have I. All of us have been able to show how the Bible contradicts itself. That's one of the interesting and amusing and titillating things about the Bible.
And so does Shakespeare.
As does any intelligent reader, including people who regard themselves as religiously observant. And essentially the argument, you're arguing yourself into a corner of irrelevance because you are addressing your argument to people who cannot hear it, or if they hear it, cannot heed it. I am much more interested in a conversation with somebody who may hold a belief that is potentially dangerous, and it is the task of our democracy to try to find a way to make ourselves heard to those people. And the kinds of things you're saying, although I know there is an audience for them, is an insufficient argument to solve what is a very real problem. It is not merely a Sunday morning book panel problem. It's a life and death problem.
And the attack is really against religious absolutists.
Well, it's
No,
also...
my attack is on faith. It's on the surrender of reason. Yes, I think that is always and everywhere a bad thing. I think to say that I demand respect for claiming the most that's possible on the least available evidence is a bizarre and probably menacing thing, even at its nicest. And I'm sorry, it's not fanatical or bullying or binary of me to ask you, does religion or does it not claim that it understands the creation and purpose of the cosmos? Is that not what it is to be religious?
To some degree, but I mean, we are, of course, we are leaving out the Buddhist Confucius. I mean, Confucius had very little to say about the creation of the universe, and other people say, well, therefore it's not a religion, it's just a social system that helps families organize themselves. And some of these debates are very much an internecine quarrel between monotheistic faiths, between Jews, Christians, and Muslims. I know you write a bit in your book about the excesses of Hinduism, of which there are certainly some. But this notion that religion is inimical to something which I think a lot of Americans are much more disposed to, which is not religion as a system that imposes itself on them, but religion as something whereby they express this very loose other term, spirituality, this sense of themselves as part of some greater narrative than just the span of this life, or some greater meaning to the whys and wherefores of why we are all here. And that is something that religion attempts to answer. Now you can say, look, there is no reason we're all here. It's all just a loose agglomeration of atoms bouncing around each other until we die, and then it's over. And if you can accumulate the most stuff until you're done, you win. But, there's another human impulse which has always been there and continues to be there, which has been manifestly unsatisfied by purely materialistic explanations of why it is that we are here. Now, whether they find those explanations in the transporting existentialism of reading Camus, or they find them in the transporting existentialism of rhythmically chanting in a Sufi lodge somewhere in the high Atlas Mountains, I think should be of no concern to any of us, insofar as those impulses are so manifestly human that any debate that we have at this panel is hardly going to make them go away.
Then they must stop trying to teach creationism to my children.
I am all in favor of that.
Let them practice these bizarre and comforting beliefs. Why can't they keep them to themselves? Why, if you thought you had a savior and a God who made you and loved you, wouldn't it make you happy? Wouldn't it cheer you up? No. You're totally miserable to let you get everyone else to believe it too. This is why it's sinister. This is why it's always dangerous. I'm sorry. There's no, if they manage to contain themselves, but by definition religion cannot do that. Its beliefs are too arrogant and too total and too certain. It is the origin of totalitarianism, and it threatens those who don't take its offer with eternal torture for themselves and their children. This is wickedness, okay? There's no other word for it.
So, Zachary, is there a way to teach fundamentalists and absolutists to understand that their religion is personal and their own, and to be able to, in some ways, look at your book as a model of periods in time in which the religion, in some ways, people tolerated each other, not just their religious beliefs, but they also enabled each other to participate in the culture without challenging one another?
Now, there's a sales technique I hadn't thought about. Fundamentalists of the world, buy my book.
I thought I would pitch in right now.
I think the people who believe in the totalitarianness of religion, that it is an all-encompassing system and should be believed according to the dictates that they feel, are not going to be people who are particularly interested either in Christopher's arguments, although the fact that his book may appear on the bestseller list may in fact lead them to feel like their voices are now not being heard. This is a dialectic, right? It goes back and forth. One day somebody's on top and a certain belief system, and I do think that the belief system that religion is evil is a belief system. It may be the correct belief system, but it is still a belief system. And the belief that religion is everything is also one. So I'm less interested in, as we're trying to convert the unconvertible, than in trying to remind people that we live in a very particular cultural moment that is determined by a level of conflict largely present between the monotheistic religions in today's world, between Muslims, Christians, and Jews. And that has not always been the case. And so the belief that this is the culmination of centuries of history is in and of itself a misreading of the past. And insofar as that tells us that we must be locked in this struggle until everyone ceases to believe, I think is also a misreading of the past. And we will all create the future as we see it. I mean, the future is not written, and it is not determined, and it is not a given. And it is up to all of us, I think, to shape it. And insofar as we believe that there is a historical burden playing itself out in the present that is inevitably going to color our future, is one that limits our vision. And that's, the only point I try to make in a book about coexistence is that it is as much part of the human legacy between these phases as conflict and as ugliness and as everything else that we are so ably and aptly reminded of in today's debates.
One quick question for Jonathan. So we're certain from today that Christopher Hitchens believes that religion is the enemy of culture in all phases. And our other two panelists are sort of ambivalent or of a middle level position. But again, Jonathan, is it possible for culture and religion to be reconciled? That's why I asked you earlier that absent the book of Revelation, would that be something we could all aspire to?
I was reminded of a trip my wife Ann and I took to Paris. We saw the Pantheon, which was a church that was desacralized after the French Revolution. It is a sterile church. You can go to Notre Dame or Sacré-Cœur, which are old medieval churches, and they're very beautiful places. We go into our art museums and we see statues that we praise as the highest art of the classical world. Their original purpose was as what our Bible calls idols. This is our culture. Religion is our culture. It provides the stuff of our culture. And to repudiate that cultural legacy is precisely the same as the Taliban going out and dynamiting Buddhist statues in Afghanistan. It's vandalism.
Silly point. Very, very silly point. Extremely silly point.
All right, with that, you've never really seen Christopher Hitchens that articulate. Silly point. All that British breeding came to that. Silly.
Jolly silly point.
Jolly silly point.
Very foolish observation.
Monty Python-esque.
Sacré-Cœur, by the way, was built in the late 19th century. It's not medieval at all. It was built to celebrate the defeat of republicanism in France. It expresses the sectarianism of the French Catholic Church.
Indeed, but
its historical alignment with the anti-Semites, the army, and the elite.
I do believe
you go worship there if you like. That's the culture
now we're
you
bickering.
find.
Now we're bickering.
All right.
I do believe Notre Dame is a medieval cathedral.
Yes, around which Thomas Aquinas once flew, you may be interested to know. He levitated all around. We have the witnesses. After leaving one of his books on the high altar to be reviewed by God and receiving, by channeling a favorable review, he flew in delight around the nave of Notre Dame. You can check it out. And many people think that's culture.
Christopher, I warned you I was here to protect Jonathan.
Okay.
All right, let's take some questions from the audience. Let me just remind you, I'll ask the people who are standing at the microphones. It's very important for you to know, and this is a moderator's prerogative. I have very little power in the world, but this is it. I would like you to ask questions. This is not here to provide a speech or to provide for some kind of political message that you have. It's a question that is addressed to our panelists and that are somewhat consistent, hopefully consistent with the description of the panel for today. Yes, you, sir.
Mr. Hitchens, how come it took the most religious country in the Western world to rescue your pretty secular country, Britain, from 2 world wars, and to be the bulwark against communism, and now to lead the fight against Islam?
Very good question. I mean it. I did correct it in 2 ways. In my country of birth, by the way, let me just say this for the first time. I've been waiting to say it for weeks. My fellow Americans. I took, if you'll allow me, I took my oath at the Jefferson Memorial in Washington on the 13th of April, which is his birthday and mine. And I remind you that he's the author of the Virginia Statute on Religious Freedom, which is the basis of the First Amendment to the Constitution, which makes America a secular country, not a religious one. The only country in the world that says that religion is no business of the state. And this has had to be defended several times from religious secessionists who wanted to ruin the Union, from those who wanted to impose prohibition, from those who imposed slavery and segregation in the name of the Bible, to those who want garbage taught in the schools now. It's an ongoing battle to keep that Constitution the way it is. In my country of birth, the Queen is the head of the church, and everyone has to pay money, whether they want to or not. When she dies, her son will become the slobbering, chinless sympathizer of Islam, a witless dauphin who goes to the mosque these days, will become the head of the church. That's what you get when you build a church on the family values of Henry VIII. For all that, I think England was worth saving, so thanks.
You, sir.
Thank
No,
you.
no, I was asking that gentleman.
I'll be very brief. It's
No,
important.
No, it's okay.
Go away. Go away. Go away. We don't want fascist crackpots taking up our meeting. Thank you. Go away. Go away.
Different panel.
Fascist crackpot.
Different.
Fascist crackpot. We're here. We're not here to talk to you. Throw him out.
Sir.
Throw him out.
Here, sir.
Throw him out. No.
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 I have exercised my discretion as a moderator. Could you please sit down
His
and
mic is off. Sir.
Let him ask the question. I don't think you're going to shut him up.
No. Come, bring it on.
It's about the
This
subject.
gentleman has the floor.
Okay.
Security. Security, please. Out you go. Go away.
Sir, why don't you ask your...
sir over here?
No, go away.
All right. Thank you. I believe that I've been offered the opportunity to ask the question.
Yes. Go.
No. No,
The answer
go
is no.
away.
Well, I think you should let him ask the question. Why do you
Next.
Okay.
Because you.
Thank you.
No, I saw the message.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Let's resume.
Okay, for a moment, let's bring science more front and center in this discussion. We're an extraordinarily successful species. In the last 200 years, we've multiplied ourselves by a factor of more than 6, and yet we live in a country today where more Christians expect to be raptured than believe in evolution. Facing the challenges we face today of global warming, which maybe threatens our children, our grandchildren's future, are we more likely to survive that challenge by accepting that science has given us our place in nature, or accepting the belief that still is common in this country that we as a species are apart from nature? Is it science or religion that gives us the future? Anyone can respond. Thank you.
That's, I think, a very wise question, and not one that has a particularly simple answer. I mean, it is certainly true that in addition to the Hal Lindsey book, the rapture literature has been extremely well selling in this country, as evidenced by the success of the Left Behind series by Tim LaHaye. I don't believe that there's any ism or thing that's going to provide that awareness. And I go back to my earlier point, which Christopher ably disagreed with, that religion can be a source of an awareness that the world does not revolve around each of our desires and needs, and certainly to some degree the limitations or potential limitations of everybody pursuing their needs willy-nilly is one that we are bearing the fruits of today. And I don't think religion as a force necessarily says man has dominion over everything. There are certainly strains of religion that say that, but there are others that very much place man in a position of stewardship, and hence the debate now emerging in the evangelical community, and with Richard Chiswick facing a whole lot of heat, pun intended, from evangelicals for his stance that there's a need to address global warming.
But I think that's evidence of the diversity of belief that's inherent in this whole phenomenon that we're addressing. There are no true fundamentalists, because even within fundamentalism there are different opinions and different voices, and the one that Zachary's pointing out, it shows that there's nothing in a fundamentalist reading of the Bible that predisposes you against doing something about global warming, for instance.
One of the ways that you can prove that the Bible is man-made is the injunction to, as well as to go forth and multiply and all that, to be given dominion, to go forth and multiply on the condition, I mean to say, that you have dominion over every fish, fowl, and other animal. They're to some extent itemized. There are no, obviously there are no marsupials in this list because the writers didn't know the existence of Australia. And there are, much more crucially, there are no microorganisms because they didn't know there were any germs. That's how you can show it was written by unwashed humans as well, who lived on intimate terms with domestic animals, who were the main part of their universe. It wouldn't have been possible to say we did have dominion over microorganisms because they did have and still do have dominion over us. Probably the greatest of the advances that you just mentioned, sir, would include the advances made since we discovered the germ theory of disease in the teeth of religious opposition to the idea. The religion wasn't a punishment. The illness wasn't a punishment. Sickness wasn't a punishment. It was a disease. But we still live at the mercy of those microorganisms. And so we are very much a part of nature, and it behooves us to realize it.
I'm afraid we're not going to have time to take any more questions. Next time, I know we had that little moment, that incident. Next time I will...
It was pithy.
Yeah, I will serve the role of both moderator and part of the security detail. Anyway, I would like to thank our esteemed guests, Christopher Hitchens, Zachary Karabell, Jonathan Kirsch.
An author panel on religion and culture from the 2007 Los Angeles Times Festival of Books, filmed live earlier today. For more information on the festival, now in its 12th year, visit latimes.com/Festival of Books.